Welcome back. And now with the news in detail. Afghanistan's chief executive Abdullah says the government is ready to hold talks with all sides to find a political solution to the country's war. He said this during a meeting with US Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad in Kabul. In a tweet, the chief executive says the US envoy briefed him on his recent diplomatic efforts towards peace in Afghanistan. Earlier, Khalilzad and Afghan President Ashraf Ghani discussed the latest development in the peace process. His visit comes as the Taliban and the United States continue their talks in Doha to find a negotiated settlement in Afghanistan. Moving on, Indian forces have martyred 21 civilians in occupied Kashmir in the month of January alone. The valley is reeling under New Delhi's curfew and the communications blackout for the past 182 days. Local media reported Indian troops have arrested over 100 activists, students, and youth over the past month. 14 people have been critically injured due to pellets, bullets, and tear gas shells fired by Indian troops during a peaceful protest against New Delhi's annexation. Occupying troops also subject 3 women to sexual abuse and ransacked and damaged 5 houses last month. In a related development, Amnesty International says the new Controversial Citizenship Act clearly violates the Constitution of India. The rights body's Asia-Pacific Advocacy Manager, Francisco Bencosme, made the remarks during testimony to US lawmakers. During the testimony, Bencosme said the act is against the international law and legitimizes discrimination on the basis of religion. Meanwhile, in another report, Amnesty said India is becoming a dangerous place for peaceful protests. It said a hateful, divisive and dehumanizing rhetoric has been unleashed on protesters by the Indian government. It said Delhi has shown its disdain towards the right to freedom of expression by carrying out sweeping arrests under repressive and colonial laws. Prime Minister Imran Khan says Pakistan has played an important role in reducing tensions in the Middle East. In an interview, Khan discussed the Middle East, the Kashmir issue, and India's Controversial Citizenship Act. Khan said continued efforts for sustainable peace are needed in the region.
There has to be some more of a permanent solution. At the moment, things are still tense, but for a time I feel that we have averted war. There was a time when it seemed that there could be actually a conflict. But at the moment, it looks as if things are cooling down.
PM Khan added India's takeover by radical Hindutva ideology has led to the current situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir. He said New Delhi has locked the valley down for the last 6 months by deploying 900,000 troops. Now moving on, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan will visit Malaysia tomorrow on a 2-day official visit. The Prime Minister is visiting on the invitation of his Malaysian counterpart Mahathir Mohamad. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the 2 Prime Ministers will sign important agreements. The Prime Minister will also address an event organized by the Institute of Strategic and International Studies in Malaysia. He will also highlight the human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. This will be Prime Minister Khan's 2nd visit to Malaysia since assuming office. In Russia, a Kremlin spokesman says US President Donald Trump's Middle East peace plan violates United Nations resolutions. He said Palestine and several Arab states have rejected the plan, putting a question mark on its feasibility. Earlier, Jordan said it wants a comprehensive peace plan that meets the rights of Palestinians as per international laws. Meanwhile, the EU's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, said the plan will not succeed without support from all sides.
The experience over the last 50 years has shown that without agreement among all sides, no peace plan has the chance to succeed.
The UN has also rejected the plan and said it is committed to pre-1967 borders between Israel and Palestine. Now moving on to Syria, where the airstrikes by the government and the Russian warplanes killed 9 people in northwestern Idlib province. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says 7 of those killed were family members. According to the UN, intensified bombardment in the region has forced nearly 700,000 people to flee towards the Turkish border. Meanwhile, Turkey has deployed armed vehicles and soldiers to its borders amid fears of a new refugee crisis. Backed by Russian jets, the Syrian troops have recently made large advances in Idlib, which is the last stronghold of rebels. The fighting in the area has shattered a ceasefire that was broken last month by Turkey and Russia. In Libya, Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar has confirmed participation in the upcoming 5+5 military commission talks in Geneva. This comes after the UN envoy in Libya, Ghassan Salameh, met Haftar in eastern Al-Rajma city. The UN-initiated committee will comprise 5 representatives of the Government of National Accord and 5 of the LNA. Its formation was announced at the Berlin Conference on Libya on 19th of January. The United Nations says the purpose of the military committee is to negotiate a full ceasefire in the country. The meeting in Geneva was earlier scheduled for 28th of January. The UN says a new date will be provided soon. In Iraq, thousands of anti-government protesters have rejected the nomination of Mohammad Alawi as the new premier. Alawi was the communications minister in former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's cabinet. Hundreds of students blocked roads near Baghdad's Tahrir Square, setting tires on fire. In Divania, protesters marched on the government buildings. Meanwhile, Iran state media said Tehran welcomed Alawi's election as Prime Minister of Iraq. Iran has kicked off 10 days of celebrations to mark the 41st anniversary of 1979 Islamic Revolution. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei visited the mausoleum of Imam Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic. Khamenei paid tribute to Iranian martyrs who lost their lives since the Islamic Revolution. Nationwide ceremonies kicked off at night yesterday, marking the exact time when Khomeini landed in Tehran after 15 years in exile. Khomeini's return to the country ultimately resulted in the overthrow of the monarch Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. In China, the death toll from the new coronavirus has now jumped to 305. The Philippines has confirmed the first fatality by the disease outside of China. This report has the details.
After travel curbs and evacuations, China is now facing trade suspensions as the country fights to contain the coronavirus outbreak. Russia has suspended visa-free travel to and from China, while suspending import of mobile phones from the country. In an alarming development, the Philippines announced a fatality from the disease, the first death reported from outside China.
DOH also confirmed that the 44-year-old male died yesterday, February 1, 2020. Over the course of the patient's admission, he developed severe pneumonia. In his last few days, the patient was stable and showed signs of improvement. However, the condition of the patient deteriorated within the last 24 hours, resulting in his demise.
With over 14,000 infected in China and more than 100 infected in at least 25 other countries, the outbreak has caused mass global hysteria. Thousands of Chinese medics are battling the disease in the virus's epicenter, Hubei province. Mayor of province's Hungang City, Qiu Lingjing, is utilizing all resources to stem the spread.
The city's financial department has released 416.39 million yuan of funds for the purchase of medical equipment and medicine. We have cleared way for these supplies to reach places where they're needed fast, and we're making sure the distribution follows proper procedures and that they're acquired and distributed on the same day with a clear record.
The UN's health body has advised against travel restrictions, saying they will hinder information sharing and medical supply chains. Beijing too has criticized travel restrictions, accusing foreign governments of ignoring official advice.
Meanwhile, China has reported an outbreak of the H5N1 bird flu in Hunan province, bordering the coronavirus epicenter Hubei. 4,500 chickens have died because of the epidemic so far, while authorities have culled nearly 18,000 poultry after the outbreak. The Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs says the outbreak occurred in a farm in the Xuanqing district of Shaojiang city. Bird flu causes severe respiratory disease in birds and can also infect humans. According to the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, bird flu is deadlier than coronavirus, with a mortality rate of over 50%. According to UN report, the 2013 bird flu outbreak in China caused $6.5 billion in economic losses. Pakistan has received 1,000 testing kits meant to detect the new coronavirus from China. A Pakistani medical official says the kits are able to isolate the virus genome using a polymerase chain reaction test. Special Assistant to Prime Minister on Health, Dr. Zafar Mirza, has announced Pakistan is now capable of detecting the coronavirus. Testing will initially be carried out at the National Institute of Health in Islamabad before being expanded to other cities. A mechanism for collecting and sending samples to the NIH is already in place. The Public Health Lab Chief at NIH said testing can take 12 to 24 hours. Medical supplies sent from Pakistan to Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak of China, also arrived at their destination on Sunday. More stories to follow, but right after a short break, stay tuned with the news. Welcome back. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is in Kazakhstan to hold talks on bilateral and regional cooperation. He met Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev and Foreign Minister Mukhtar Tuluberdi in the capital city of Nur-Sultan. Pompeo is on a tour of Central Asia as Washington competes with Moscow for influence in the region. Ahead of the visit, Pompeo said Washington has an important opportunity to help Central Asian countries become independent. He said there is a lot of Chinese and Russian activity in the region. Pompeo will fly to Uzbekistan after meeting the Kazakh leadership. Russia has retained military bases, security and trade blocs in the Central Asian countries after they broke from the Soviet Union in 1991. Bolivia's interim government has granted a safe conduct to two of exiled ex-president Evo Morales' ex-ministers. Former Minister of Mining Cesar Navarro and former Deputy Minister of Agriculture Pedro Damian Dorado were allowed to travel to Mexico to receive asylum. The former ministers had been residing in the Mexican embassy in La Paz along with another 7 members of Morales' administration. The government said the detention of the former officials was a mistake.
Unfortunately, there was a lack of coordination between the Public Ministry and the National Police, and this morning, 3 days after the safe conduct was granted, the police waited for him at the airport and apprehended them.
The diplomatic dispute between Mexico and Bolivia has been brewing since Mexico granted asylum to 9 of ex-President Morales' allies. Now moving on to Japan, which has dispatched a warship to the Gulf of Oman to help safeguard the country's oil supplies through the Middle East's dense waterways. The route supplies nearly 90% of the island nation's oil. Talking to the crew at the naval base near Tokyo, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said thousands of Japanese vessels crossed those waters. He said the warship is prepared to authorize force to protect ships in danger. Earlier, the helicopter destroyer Takanami left the port to protect merchant ships and oil tankers. The destroyer will share waters in the region along with US, French and British warships. France says it will deploy 600 more soldiers in the fight against militants in the Africa Sahel south of the Sahara. In a statement, Defense Minister Florence Parly said the reinforcements will be sent to the area between Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger. She said another part of the reinforcements will join the G5 Sahel forces. France has about 4,500 troops already operating in the region, bringing the total to 5,100. These soldiers are supporting poorly equipped, impoverished local armies that in 2017 launched a joint anti-jihadist G5 Sahel force. 20 people have been killed in a stampede during Sunday church service at a stadium in northern Tanzania. Government officials say hundreds crushed each other in a rush to get anointed in Moshi town. They said 5 among the dead were children, while 16 others were injured in the incident. Authorities fear the death toll could rise because of the size of the crowd. In Somalia, 8 government soldiers have been killed in an attack by Al-Shabaab militants near the Kalimao region. 10 Al-Shabaab militants were also killed in the shootout. Military officials said the militants attacked the Somali National Army and the African Union peacekeeping troops in the Middle Shabelle region. They said over 13 others were wounded in the attack. The officials said the militants also fired mortar shells on several other observation posts. The attacks came a day after double blasts in capital Mogadishu, killing over 4 soldiers and wounding a deputy commissioner. In Canada, 3 people have been killed and 2 others wounded in shooting in an apartment in Toronto. Police said a 5th person was stabbed, but the victim's life was not in danger. Police hasn't given any information on the victims' identities or a possible motive so far, but they said the incident took place in an Airbnb rental in Toronto. Officials said the dead were young men aged 22, 20 and 19. Canada says it doesn't accept discrimination or exclusion against any of its ethnic groups of Asian origin. Speaking during a Lunar New Year celebration in Scarborough, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau appealed to people to be tolerant to all ethnicities. He said Canadians need to support each other and stay united. Trudeau stressed there is no place in Canada for discrimination driven by fear or misinformation.
Just like here today, we need to support each other and stay united. Let me be clear. There is no place in our country for discrimination driven by fear or misinformation. This is not something Canadians will ever stand for.
Australian Capital Territory, Canberra, has lifted the state of emergency. Threats of massive bushfires receded after burning 55,000 hectares of land. However, rural and the remote areas will continue to remain on a state of alert. Earlier, the threat level was downgraded to advice level before being upgraded to watch and act. Act Emergency Services Commissioner Georgina Wellen said there was no significant growth of the fire. Wellen said the fire continues to burn slowly downhill away from the capital. But Wellen warned the storms from the northwest could pose a new threat by whipping up the fires. The U.S. officially enters election season with the February 3 Iowa caucuses, where the selection for party nominees will begin. Americans are sharply divided on political solutions, but broadly agree on at least one point: the country is changing. The report has the details.
Ladies and gentlemen, is everything okay in Iowa? Oh.
The U.S. presidential campaign is officially starting with the Iowa caucuses. The first stop is Clairton, in an industrial region of western Pennsylvania. The state was once reliably Democratic.
A lot of my members feel that they were, their opinions on it were ignored, that the union should have endorsed Trump. Now, around the country, I don't know if that's changed or not, but I know my membership, they're still pretty, the majority of them are still behind Trump.
In a few months, Pennsylvania and other swing states will decide whether Donald Trump gets to stay in the White House. As he campaigns for re-election, the US president is taking credit for the hot economy. But here in the Rust Belt, manufacturing jobs continue to disappear.
When I first got out of high school, you could have got the day you walked out that door, you could have got a job, good paying, good health benefits, good pension, anywhere on a railroad, trucking, steel mills, the mines, anywhere.
Drive about 160 miles to the north and you'll reach Ashtabula on the shore of Lake Erie in Ohio. Just like Pennsylvania, Ohio chose Donald Trump in 2016 after going to Barack Obama twice. The journey ends in Iowa. The population in this rural state is 90% white, and some Democrats say it doesn't reflect the diversity of their party. Polls predict a tight race among Democratic contenders in Iowa. After that, the campaign heads to the state of New Hampshire.
Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar says the UK and EU shouldn't set rigid red lines before trade talks, as that could make it difficult to secure an agreement. Varadkar said it was possible for Brussels to offer a Canada-style free trade deal, but he warned it will be different because of all economies being integrated. He also cautioned against nationalistic rhetoric.
And let's tone down the kind of nationalistic rhetoric. As is always the case when it comes to negotiations, setting out so boldly such firm red lines actually makes coming to an agreement more difficult.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson initially set out a tough position before talks with the EU, but Varadkar warned any deal would have to come with a level playing field. Now moving on, after Brexit, 15 EU member states have urged the bloc's leaders to maintain their aid money in the next long-term budget. The member countries raised the issue at the Friends of Cohesion Summit in the Portuguese city of Beja. The European Commission has proposed slashing cohesion funds by around 22 billion euros for 2021 to 27 period. In a joint declaration, leaders of the affected nations said any cuts in investment capacity will be unacceptable. Britain accounted for around 15% of EU's economy and was the bloc's biggest military spender. But in the event of Brexit, Germany proposed reducing the size of cohesion funds and attached conditions on spending. Psychological thriller Joker has nabbed 11 nominations for the BAFTA Awards, leading the table. The British Academy of Film and Television Arts is hosting its 73rd Annual Movie Awards today. Hollywood stars are set to pack the Royal Albert Hall in London. Crime flick The Irishman and comedy drama Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a tale behind Joker on the nomination board. Sam Mendes' World War I epic 1917, which has 9 nominations, is the favorite for the Best Film and Best Director categories. The ceremony will be hosted by TV presenter Graham Norton and attended by Prince William and Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton. It's time for a short break. We'll be right back. Turkey has announced it will seek new trade channels with the UK. Turkey's trade ministry said Ankara will be open to talks for a bilateral free trade deal through existing structures. Meanwhile, the EU has assured a non-hostile transition for the kingdom after the exit from the single market. In an open letter, French President Emmanuel Macron emphasized on Britain's unrivaled ties with France. Brussels Brexit coordinator Guy Verhofstadt said that EU will work to ensure it is a project the UK would want to be a part of it again. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus Special.